Kenny Golde's on the line with us. SettleYourCreditCards.com is his website. A fascinating story here about a filmmaker who, well, first of all, Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Tom. It's good to be on.
Thank you. Back in the 1970s, I started a business with a $10,000 line of credit on my American Express card. So I can, I have some empathy for what you did. Back in the 70s, 10 grand is like 100 grand today. And
easily.
Yeah. And, Louise and I hung ourselves out to dry there. Fortunately, the business took off and we were able to pay that line of credit off. You had an experience where you're a filmmaker. In fact, you're in Bucharest, Romania right now making a new movie. Do I have that right?
That's right, making a television series called Life on Top for HBO.
Oh, great. And Romania has been in the news. We could have a whole conversation about the politics there, but that's a whole separate thing. I want to stay on this topic. You were making a movie. You ran up $212,000, as I recall.
Yeah.
$212,000 in debt on your credit cards, on the assumption that you would be able to sell the movie and pay them off and actually make a profit, $500,000 that you'd be able to get for this thing. And then the market went in the tank and people stopped buying movies and you were stuck with a $212,000 debt on your credit cards. And thus begins the story that you tell over at SettleYourCreditCards.com. And you're kind of selling a how-to book for $19 or a manual or whatever, instructions over there. But I just find the whole thing fascinating. I wanted to get you on and tell us the story. So tell us what happened.
Sure. Well, I was making this movie, a film called Uncross the Stars, and I had an investor who was investing in the film. We were going a little bit over budget, as happens with films, only my investor, who was also a close friend of mine, very sadly passed away while we were shooting the film. And I was left funding close to $250,000 to finish the movie, as you said, with the intent of selling the film and recouping the investment and paying off the debt, which I'd done 6 or 7 times over the course of my career as a filmmaker in the past, and had no reason to believe that it wouldn't be that way again this time. Only just as we finished the film, the credit market collapsed, movie buying money dried up with all other credit and money in the world financial markets, and I was carrying this, at this point, $212,000 on 7 credit cards spread over 6 major U.S. banks, paying quite nearly $4,000 a month in interest, and really not seeing any way to get out of it.
Right, and for months you continued to pay the interest on this. You were not going to play deadbeat. I'm assuming you didn't run this through a corporation, so you could declare corporate bankruptcy. These were credit cards that you had personally guaranteed.
Both. It was split between my own personal corporation, but yes, the corporate credit cards still had my personal guarantee on them.
Right, as they always do. So how did you get out of this thing, Kenny Golde?
Well, at one point I visited a bankruptcy attorney to explore my options, to say, what can I do with this? What's available to me? And he said, well, bankruptcy is available to you, but before you file bankruptcy, you can also look at settling your debt for less than you owed. And I, frankly, was quite surprised to hear it now. It's out there. Every television commercial and radio commercial we hear talks about it, but this was about 1.5 years ago. It was not known basically to the general public that this was possible. I went to do some research on how to do it, and I really couldn't find anything. I couldn't find a book, a couple of websites that had a 3 to 5 bullet points there. There was no information on what this process looked like. But
right, and there are people who will sell this to you as a service very dearly. I mean, the people give these companies thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, large percentages of their debt, whatever. Who will contact the credit card companies and basically bust their chops and get the thing down. You learned how to do it on your own, and you're telling people how to do that over at SettleYourCreditCards.com. What was the process, and what happened to your $212,000 debt?
Sure. Well, the first thing that my bankruptcy attorney told me was banks, the lending institutions that issue credit cards, aren't really interested in talking to their customers about debt settlement while they're current on their payments. So the first thing people need to look at is, am I willing to stop making my credit card payments and deal with the phone calls and the collection calls that come with that in order to achieve a result that's more beneficial to my financial life?
So you quit making payments?
I stopped. I kept making them, as you indicated, for many, many months while I was trying to service this debt and sell the film. And finally, when I had no other choice, I stopped making my payments. And, of course, the collection calls came. And at the beginning, I would say, I'm interested in settling this debt. And they would at first say, we don't do that. But after a couple more months, they'd say, well, you know, we do that sometimes, but we only offer settlements in the 80 to 95% range of what you owe, which I found humorous. Mm-hmm. And over the course of several months, between 6 and 9 months for most of my cards, their offers each month started dropping to 65% of the total debt, 50% of the total debt. I wound up settling most of my debt in the 30 to 35% range. I had one card with a $76,000 balance on it that I settled for $25,000. They wrote $51,000 off the debt, just right like that.
Wow. And it was just a matter of basically you were playing poker, you were playing chicken with the banks, and you outlasted them.
Yeah, what I talk about mostly in the book, I obviously outline the whole process. I give detailed scripts of what the phone calls sound like, the scripts that they use, so that you, as the consumer, can start to recognize the verbiage on the phone.
Because they are using scripts, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I noticed right off the top was that because I was with 6 different banks, 7 cards, they all sounded alike, and it became really obvious to notice the pattern on all the phone calls, and all of that is in the book. And then also the emotional side of it is a big thing. Many people, most people, almost everybody attaches emotion to their finances in general, and most people attach some level of negative emotion to debt. It produces fear and pain and anxiety.
And guilt.
And we don't want to tell our friends about it or our spouses about it. We hide it, and that produces more anxiety. And the collection agents, they know that, and their job on the phone is to use that against you, because if they can build up that anxiety, what they really are saying is, write a check now and you can get rid of all that fear and pain and anxiety. I'm saying you have the power as a consumer to let go of all that negative emotion first, and then approach these phone calls from a level playing field, equal with the person on the other side of the phone, negotiating a business deal like any other business person would, and you'll do much better at hanging out the time you need to achieve a good settlement.
Right. Now, Kenny Golde, this is sort of halfway between bankruptcy and doing what many people would consider the honorable thing, which is paying off the debt. I mean, after you had negotiated these settlements, you were paying off less than you spent. I mean, you ended up basically ahead of the game. Some people would argue that is a form of theft. Mm-hmm. What's your response to that?
I've heard that argument, and I respond with, we as individuals seem to be taught that not paying off your debts entirely somehow says something bad about you, that if you can't manage your credit card debt or your mortgage, that you're a bad person, or insert adjective here, or whatever it is. And in the current economy, we're starting to see that so many people are suffering financially through no fault of their own whatsoever. And the business world, I find, treats debt on a different level than individuals. They buy and sell and trade debt like it's a commodity. Nobody points at the CEO of an airline when jet fuel goes up 1,000% over the summer and he has to file bankruptcy and write off $500 million in loans. Nobody points at that person and says, you bad person, how could you do that? He treats the finances, or she treats the finances of the company with the best interests of the shareholders in mind, and part of that might be writing off debt. I feel that every individual out there, every head of a household or a family, has the right to think of him or herself as the CEO of their own corporation, the corporation of you, and you have the right to treat debt with the same unemotional detachment that any person on the other end of the phone that you're doing business with is treating it. Why not? Why should we think we're bad people for writing off debt when the banks we're doing business with don't?
Yeah, well, the why not is because arguably it tears at the fabric of a society that's based on trust. But I would submit that trust has been violated over the last 30 years, ever since Reagan began changing the rules of business and led us into this debt as a commodity economy. So
that's a big conversation I'd love to talk to you about more at another time.
Yeah, that's really a whole other topic. But
really
Kenny Golde, this is something that, if you're in trouble, if you're underwater with your credit cards, if you're under your head, check out settleyourcreditcards.com. Kenny, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Thom, for having me.
And good luck on your new TV show.